This story happened to me almost 3 years ago when I was still married to my ex-husband, who we will call Dan. At the time, we were going through a difficult divorce. In the beginning of our marriage, my mother-in-law and I got along quite fine. We will call her Bridget. Bridget and I were like best friends, and since my mom had passed away when I was a child, she felt almost like a mom to me. My relationship with Bridget took a turn for the worst when Dan and I decided to move across the country, a 6-hour plane ride away. She tried to persuade us to stay and said she couldn't stand being away from her grandchildren. When that didn't work, she tried to guilt trip her son into staying. She would tell him that he didn't love her and didn't care about her. Dan's father had passed away and he was taking care of his mom since his dad's passing. Dan and I decided that the best thing to do for our family at the time was to move despite his mother's disapproval. I should mention that the reason why we were moving was because I had inherited a ranch on 30 acres of property a few years before our marriage. We never really thought we would live there, but it was sitting vacant, and with the pandemic and everything going on, we wanted to be in a less populated area. With all of this in mind, Bridget felt like it was my fault that her only son and grandchildren were moving away. What she didn't know at the time is that we were considering asking her to move with us. We decided to just go with our children first to test it out. Also, from my perspective, I hated the way she was behaving and wasn't sure how to move forward with her. Finally, we made our big move, which took some adjusting. We adjusted quite well over time, and the kids really loved having a lot of space to play. Dan and I would have the kids FaceTime Bridget a few times a week for the first few weeks. Her obsession with Dan and our kids just became more apparent. She would tell our kids things like, "Your mother moved you away from me, and it hurts me so badly." After the calls, our kids would be very sad. We decided that it was best if they didn't communicate with her as frequently, which only made her even more upset. She began sending me angry text messages, calling me names and telling me I didn't deserve her son and our marriage wouldn't last. I decided that I no longer wanted to have a relationship with her. Of course, Dan continued communicating with her because he just couldn't say no to his mother. During a conversation with Dan and Bridget, I overheard her saying nasty things about me. I heard her say, "Yeah, if that wife of yours was to ever die, you would get the ranch and I could help you take care of the kids." I was so angry that she was saying these things about me. Dan told her that what she was saying wasn't right, and we never spoke about it. About a year after our big cross-country move, Dan and I decided that the marriage just wasn't working anymore. I think the pressure his mother was putting on him took a toll on the marriage. We fought a lot, and his mother was always giving her 2 cents on the marriage. I decided to file for divorce. We agreed that I would keep the ranch since it had been in my family for more than 4 generations. However, there was some disagreement about who would keep the other assets. I found out from a close family friend that Bridget was demanding that Dan everything, including the ranch and our children. A few weeks after I filed for divorce, Dan moved out of the ranch and went to stay with his mother. When he was leaving, he asked if the kids could come back with him for a few months until the summertime. I told him no. That's when I got an angry text message from Bridget telling me I could no longer keep her grandchildren from her and that she would do everything in her power to make sure I didn't. One day, I was out running errands and I had left my children at home with the babysitter. As I turned down my private street, I noticed a car following me. Like I said, I lived on a large property on a private street. The only people who drove down our street were members of our family and guests. I stopped my car and waited for the other car to catch up to me. Yeah, I know that pretty stupid of me. When the car finally caught up to me, I put my window down to speak to the driver of the black SUV. He introduced himself as an undercover police officer and said he was hired by my mother-in-law to end my life. I couldn't believe it. He said he had been following me for a few weeks. About 10 minutes into the conversation, about 4 police cars and another unmarked police car arrived. Standing on my property were local police officers and FBI agents. I knew Bridget was angry, but I hadn't imagined that she would be so angry to order a hit on me. I found out that she was planning to have me gone in order to have Dan inherit the ranch and have full custody of the children. He had made it very clear to her that the ranch was mine and would remain mine. He also told her that he was going to move back closer to the children instead of uprooting them. She was very angry that he wasn't under her control anymore. She ended up being prosecuted and was sent to prison on conspiracy charges. Dan was never charged with anything because he knew nothing about the crime. Our divorce was finalized about 6 months after all of this happened. We decided after the divorce to get back together, and we are now planning to remarry in the spring of this year. Bridget is still in prison, and neither of us nor our children have any communication with her. Our marriage has been stronger ever since, and our family is happy without her being in our lives.
The story I'm about to share with you happened to me while I was living with my ex and his parents. He and I had fallen on hard times, so we had to move into his parents' basement temporarily. The plan was for us to stay there for 6 months until the start of his new finance job. We never made it that long after the story I am about to share with you. From the very beginning, my ex's mom and I had an awkward relationship. She had a close friendship with his ex-girlfriend and hated that I was the opposite of her. The main reason why she disliked me so much was because she didn't approve of her son's interracial dating preference. In every conversation I had with her, she brought up his ex-girlfriend. She always told me how awesome this ex was and how beautiful she was, and she wished they were still together. I would tell me boyfriend and he would confront her about it. Each time he confronted her, she would deny everything. He felt like he was caught in the middle, and it caused him a lot of stress. One day she confronted me when my ex went out fishing with his dad and brother. She backed me into a corner and told me, "I am his mother. I am not going anywhere, but you are temporary and never forget that." She also told me not to bother telling my boyfriend about any of the nasty things she said to me because he would never believe me. She made it very clear to me that he would always choose her over me. Whenever I was alone with her, she always acted aggressively, but in front of everyone else she was nice. About a month into living in the basement, 2 of the brand new tires I had just bought for my car were slashed. We had no idea who had done it. Happened overnight while we were sleeping. The following night, the remaining tires were slashed. I didn't know anyone who would slash all 4 of my tires, and this began to worry my boyfriend and me. We were already low on money, and it was going to be a financial burden to replace the tires. My boyfriend knew how stressed I was about everything that was happening around us. He wanted to do something nice for me, so he planned a picnic at the beach. We had planned to spend the entire afternoon at the beach, about 4 or 5 hours to be exact. His mother knew where we were going and when we would be back. After 30 minutes at the beach, the weather took a turn and it became very windy. We decided to leave the beach early and head back to his house. We pulled up to his house and saw his mother standing outside with a brick in her hand right by my car. We noticed that the driver's side window had been shattered. My boyfriend asked her what was going on, and she told us that 2 masked men had thrown a brick through my window and hopped over the fence when she ran outside to confront them. She said she started picking up bricks, said throwing it at them, and that's why she was standing there with the brick in her hand. I knew she had made up that story and I didn't even say a word to her. My boyfriend believed everything she said, and he hopped back into his car and drove around the entire neighborhood looking for the two masked men. After 20 minutes, my boyfriend returned without ever finding the two masked men. I had called the cops while he was gone, and the cops were arriving at the same time as my boyfriend. The police took our statements and advised just to install cameras. My boyfriend and his brother installed cameras, and nobody ever came back again. His mother tried to convince him that I was cheating on him, and it was probably the other guy who vandalized my car out of range. Thankfully, my boyfriend didn't buy into her crazy theories. When her and I were alone, she would always complain about how she felt like she was under surveillance with all of the cameras around the house. We found out a couple of weeks following the car drama that I was pregnant. My boyfriend and I were very excited that we were going to be first-time parents. His other relatives were also excited, except for his mother, of course. Her reaction to my pregnancy was quite dramatic. She was crying hysterically and saying she felt like she was losing her son. She was having a meltdown about how her bloodline was being poisoned. That year, we celebrated Thanksgiving with his family. We sat down to have dinner and his mother poured us each a glass of her famous holiday drink. There was a special glass for me with the words, "Mom to be" written on it. For some reason, I didn't feel safe drinking from a glass she poured specially for me. My boyfriend noticed this and he switched with me. My boyfriend took a sip from my glass and she started screaming at him, telling him it was made special for me. Everyone at the table looked at her like she was crazy. For the entire meal, she looked really nervous and she kept asking my boyfriend if he was okay. About an hour after dinner, my boyfriend started feeling sick. He was vomiting all over himself. We rushed him to the hospital as his condition worsened. At the hospital, we found out that my boyfriend had poison in his system. The doctor said we did the right thing by bringing him in because he could have died after ingesting so much of whatever substance they found. Legally, the doctor had to report the incident to the authorities. My boyfriend didn't want to speak to the police, so there was nothing they could really do. The next day after the incident, I had decided it was time for me to leave and I went to Chicago to live with my family. As you've probably guessed, we broke up and I decided not to keep the baby. I didn't want my baby to grow up with a dysfunctional family like his. His mother got what she wanted because he ended up marrying his ex.
My husband's parents divorced about 3 years ago. It was really hard on everyone in the family. His parents had been married for more than 30 years and no one even knew they were having issues. When they divorced, my mother-in-law had to leave the marital home because she just could not afford to live there. She resented the fact that she had to downsize and live in an apartment. Let's fast forward 6 months later, my father-in-law started dating another woman. This made my mother-in-law extremely angry. My husband and his siblings were respectful to their father's new girlfriend and thought she was nice. I developed a friendship with her over our love for horses. My mother-in-law really hated the fact that I was becoming close with this new woman and threatened to stop speaking to me. I don't like to be controlled, so her threats made me angry and I continued my friendship with this woman. My father-in-law proposed to his girlfriend and soon after, she moved into his home. This really infuriated my mother-in-law. She would call all of us and complain about how she felt disrespected. She felt like her home was stolen from her and she resented her ex-husband. We all tried to calm her down and tell her to move on. My sister-in-law even tried to create a dating profile for her online so she could meet someone. One day, we all gathered at my mother-in-law's new apartment for Easter brunch, and when we told her we were having dinner with my father-in-law and his new girlfriend, she became angry. She called us disloyal and said if we went over to that house, she would never speak to us again. Nonetheless, we decided to all have dinner at my father-in-law's home. In the middle of dinner, we heard a loud bang, which scared us all. We jumped to our feet and ran to the living room where we heard the bang. We noticed that the living room was on fire. The fire spread rapidly throughout the front of the home, which included the living room and a part of the dining room where we sat for dinner. The smell of gasoline filled the room quickly, and within seconds, we couldn't breathe. We all dashed for the back door, which was through the kitchen, and as we made our way out the door, standing there was my mother-in-law. She was getting ready to set the back door on fire too. My husband quickly grabbed the lighter and the can of lighter fluid from her hands. We were all in shock. It was absolute chaos at that point. My brother-in-law and husband grabbed the water hose while I called 911. My father-in-law stood in silence, watching the home he worked all his life to build go up into flames. The look on his fiancée's face was terrifying. My mother-in-law, who looked like she had been drinking, sat on the curb and cried. The firefighters showed up on the scene quickly and put the fire out. The police arrested my mother-in-law. While the police took her away in handcuffs, she was screaming at my father-in-law, telling him this was his fault. This incident changed our family dynamics, and we haven't looked at my mother-in-law the same since. She didn't care about her family enough to think twice about setting the house on fire while we were all inside. To this day, she hasn't taken accountability for her actions. Be careful, everyone. When someone threatens you, you should take it seriously. Stay spooked.